So today I wanted to talk about rain gardens. And so let's see, who here designs rain gardens? Great. And who would like to put in a rain garden or manage one in their community? All right. So I'm going to give it different levels of advice here. I could get really technical, but basically I'll let you can ask questions as we move on. What I really wanted to call this presentation was Stop Building Ugly Rain Gardens. But Sherry said, you know, that's not really not the best thing for the brochure. So we worked out planning for function and beauty. The reason I say stop building ugly rain gardens, and I'm talking to myself too, is that there can be community backlash against green stormwater infrastructure if it's not done in a way that's beautiful. Now, of course, you have to get the basics right, the soils, the water in, the water out. So a lot of what I'll be talking about is the aesthetics of the rain garden and getting that right. And that counts for different types of green stormwater infrastructure. So today I'll talk about why they need to be beautiful. As I said, there could be community backlash if it looks bad, or community support if you do it right for even more. And then instead of just saying stop building ugly rain gardens, I'll help you figure out how to build beautiful ones. And let's go. And then we'll finish off with questions and technical advice. At the end of the presentation, I have more technical advice on soils and infiltration. We might have time for it, or you can just review it online. So get these three things right: soils, water in and out, and plants. That's the basics for green stormwater infrastructure such as rain gardens. So I've been a landscape architect out of school in 1981, so I've just been doing green stuff forever, design. The sustainable design has evolved in the US and really became of importance starting in the 70s, a little more 80s, 90s. This is a rain garden that was done up at Cornell. And let's talk aesthetics. It's not real nice looking. I did that one. It uses a lot of perennials. And sometimes perennials just don't all work in a rain garden. Sometimes they live, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they get mowed over. Sometimes there's not enough water to it. Now, I didn't do that one. That's another one that I saw. This one's Bucks County. It's in the middle of the winter. When people see that, they don't want more rain gardens, even if there is a rain garden sign explaining what plants are going in there. You know, the problem with this one is, well, it was all perennials used, and the rain garden was also put down in a floodplain saturated soils. So basically, don't try to do a rain garden down where the soils are already saturated. Really, what we want rain gardens to do is have water go in and water go out. There are rain garden systems that are wet, but talking about the general ones that community groups will do, or you do in your backyard, you want the water in and out, so you have to have infiltration. I was just over at Delaware Valley University a couple days ago. So here's a rain garden. They have some things right here, visually. I'm sure the soils and the plants all work right, but there's a lot of dead area in there, you know. And so, you know, at this university, that's fine. There's so many beautiful areas, but I just wanted to show this is an example of perhaps what we can do better.
That doesn't look much better in summer.
Okay. Nice thing. No, it's interesting to hear that, and that's pretty common. It is good to have some plants around it. So let's see if I can get this button to work. It doesn't like me. But right nearby, there's a vegetated swale, and this is, you know, winter interest really means a lot. So here we have red twig and yellow twig dogwood. So you want a winner. This is a winner, and this can be the core of a rain garden in our area. And just visually, if you think back to your high school art classes, there's different things to think about when doing rain gardens. Really simply, colors mean more when they're up against another color. So if it was just the red twig, you might not even notice it, but it's combined red and yellow. So there's so many combinations like that. A blue-leaved grass that might be next to red gravel, you wouldn't even notice the blue-leaved grass unless it was next to the red gravel. And we talked about getting the soils right and the water. This is a fairly well-known failure out in Seattle. You know, Seattle's really known for doing all the just wonderful rain gardens. But it happens, they had a shovel-ready project, and they went for it, and they got it put in very quickly. But they didn't have the infiltration underneath. So there was a big to-do about this. And some of these were ripped out. There were a few in this area, and they redid them. So you don't want that kind of bad PR. Make sure you're checking the soils underneath. These are 3 rain gardens that are over in Cherry Hill. This is all perennials. And when you go with all perennials, you know what you're going to get in winter is all mulch. And if the perennials live, you're doing good. It brought a tour of some kids from Camden around the Cooper and Newton watershed. And, you know, I'm trying to explain to these kids all the great green stormwater infrastructure, and here's a rain garden that looks like this in the middle of winter. So it's a really hard way to sell. Fortunately, they knew they had a problem, and they fixed it. Now, it's still all perennials, but they know they had a mower problem. They came back in and they replanted it. So, you know, it's fairly common to have a little problem with the rain garden. Plants die. They need a little replanting. There was a rain garden here. The mayor didn't like it, and it's gone. So it happens. So that's why I'm saying it's very important to do beautiful rain gardens, just for the water quality.
Did he not like it because of the way it looked, or is another problem?
Yeah, the way it looked,
So,
yeah.
there's another problem.
Yeah, now, of course, beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
Sure.
And I'm prejudiced. I like meadows. But a lot of people would see that as unkempt. So I just, yesterday drove around, and Michelle had shown some of these rain gardens in her slideshow. So I got to go out to Passyunk Ave. So here we have a winter scenes. Winter scenes are like looking at yourself in the morning before you've had your cup of coffee and washed up. So it's very important to me to see this and to admit it. All the beautiful pictures that people have up on their websites include all the flowers and just the peak time. And it's really not what people live with. And I saw a presentation from the Philadelphia Water Department, and they have a nice feedback loop. Anybody here from Philadelphia Water Department? All right. And they understand what people's perceptions are and get that feedback loop back in. So in here, at least it's not all dead in the winter. There's something going on. I'm not going to criticize this a lot because there could be perennials and things coming up here. I know it might look a little ugly there, but they had to do that for the water that's shooting out of these outfalls. And this grass here, you'll hear a few times, is switchgrass. And down here, I think that's juncus down there, the Juncus effusus, the soft rush. And further down, that looks okay in the winter. It's wintertime. Some people might not like that, but at least it has structure. There's something there. It's better than pure mulch. And I was by it last summer, and this is what that same spot looked like. So, okay, add flowers in that at some time. They're doing a good job. And this is along Passyunk Ave too. So look what's holding up during the winter, the switchgrass in the back, and then that's the Juncus effusus again. And there's another spot. And this is really appropriate along here. Some maybe more refined landscapes, maybe this isn't the right approach. Maybe it's better done with shrubs and trees. This works really well along here. It's junkyards and car dealerships, and so it just fits in the landscape really well. So I wanted to talk about three projects that I've worked on fairly recently. And I want to talk about two basic approaches. One is a meadow approach for a rain garden. You don't hear much about it. It sort of was a meadow approach when you saw the switchgrass, but a wet meadow is an appropriate thing to do in a rain garden. You never see it, so I'll talk a lot about it. The little more common is the shrubs and the perennials and the trees. The perennial system, I'm just going to say right now, avoid it. Don't go all perennials. You look up the rain garden information, quite often it's a list of just perennials. Just stay away from, add in some structure. It's got to be interesting all year long. Sequence of bloom, I'll go on and on. But this one right here is Van Sciver School, where we put in a large bioretention area here, and then wrapping around the building over here. And this was done with Melior design. So that's after we seeded it and we had some plugs of grasses, filled the whole thing with grass plugs. And then we put in some perennials. So that's we did it in the spring. So this is the fall. The trees are in here. There's shrubs along the edges. So basically, I said meadow. It's really a savanna, technically, because it has trees. But most people don't recognize what a savanna is. So that's a savanna design, or you could call it a meadow design. And then this is wrapping around the back of the building, I was saying, looking down there when we started the work. And so that's what it looked like toward the end of the year. We were able to put in some potted plants. So that's the swamp milkweed, and then full of grasses that are seeded and plugged. Now that's what it looked like 2 days ago in that area. It looks a little bit like a meadow. I'd say it looks a little rough. Some people might like it. It looks quite natural. So you can judge it yourself. Everybody has a different opinion on it. It looked beautiful when it was green. At least it's not all empty. This is what a meadow looks like in the winter often. So then so that was around the back of the school, and then around the front of the school, dropping back a season. This was the first winter season. And there's plenty of structure. It's not all just mulch. The water comes in here, runs through, and then around the back. So you can see something to look at. Trees, there's actually shrubs in there, which provide some structure. And that is the same area yesterday. So there's something there. Not for everybody. This is not an approach for everybody, the meadow, but it's a very, very low maintenance. There's been almost none in this rain garden. That's the amazing thing of this. We put in plugs, we put down filter fabric, we put down seed mix, and literally, we've gone in there and done virtually nothing. Now I know we're supposed to go in and scrape out the swale as the sediment gets washed in, and so we should do a little bit more. But talk about no maintenance. This is about as close as you can get to it. And that was yesterday. So just talking about the planting design for this area. Call it low meadow. out west, they call them low meadows, high meadows. We don't put in Indian grass in here. This is more of the little blue stem and Andropogon virginicus. And then there's a variation on that. So, sorry, I'm talking botanical. Broom sedge we put in there, and the blue stem. And then we also put in a glomeratus, which is the bushy blue stem, likes it a little bit wetter. It is very low maintenance. Species, I'll just give the general. Species that go in rain gardens need to handle wet and dry. If you see a rain garden list that is listing all kinds of wetland plants, it's the wrong list. Just move on. It really needs to handle drought, and especially if some of these soils are manufactured soils that are sand-based with, say, a little bit of mulch in it, it's going to dry out really hard. So it's almost a xeric situation. So the plants really need to handle both wet and dry. And so the plants that really do well are called generalist species. So generalist species can handle heavy drought or wet. For instance, the switchgrass. I've seen it growing in a foot of brackish water. I've seen it growing on a sand dune. And it grows along the side of highways. You can see it a lot. It just grows everywhere because it's a generalist species. And it's a native, and that is why people use it so much, and it's easy to get established. So that type of plant is perfect for rain gardens. So I have these in here. I won't go through specific plants, but this will be in the presentation of what was put in at the Van Sciver Rain Garden. So plenty of trees and shrubs. And as I was saying, little blue stem and the broom sedge. And then we seeded the bottom of the basin with all of this. And you'll notice there's no forbs in this list, no perennials. So what we wanted to do, I noticed also over the years, is that people don't know how to maintain rain gardens. You put in all these different plants, and as a landscape architect, you design the job, and then it's up to the college crew to come in and maintain it. It doesn't happen. So it's just a real problem. So I thought through a lot of different past projects to come up with this. And I was thinking, well, how do we just solve it? Okay, all grasses, but we need flowers too, not too many. So we chose 5 flowering plants just so they would be easy to identify. So we did it in the sequence of bloom. So so we got the blue iris and the swamp milkweed and the gay feather, and we did black-eyed Susan and New York grass, so early spring to fall. And then we did come in after it established, and we added a few more plants. We saw that how low maintenance it really was. Came in and added some more. So that's what it will look like in just a couple weeks. So the blooming starts up again.
When was that installed, planted? How long ago?
That was 2012, I think. Yeah. And it's doing well. And it's similar to other projects. It's a native meadow with trees. And so this is done by Think Green LLC over at Haverford. Did this with Milliard Design. I was at Andropogon Associates. So this is our project over there. You can see the meadow with the trees. Very low maintenance. So then nearby over at Peters Creek, we had working with the community there, and they saw the Van Sciver Rain Garden, and they were like, oh, that's nice, but it's not for us. The meadow is just a little too rough looking. So we talked to them, and we said, yeah, we can get this to look just beautiful. That was the most important thing for this community, was beauty. And we also wanted to get the stormwater in there, so we had a nice advocate. So what I designed here was, I'll call this the Woody system, where you get the structure of the rain garden by the trees, and then there's lots of shrubs in here, so it's mostly trees and shrubs. It's a little hard to tell from this early planting. And then it's accented with grasses and perennials. So just to real break it down, the other's a meadow system, this is a woody system. Yes?
What do you mean by ease of weed identification in regards to the perennials?
Oh, sure. On that last project, the hardest thing to know is what's a weed and what's not when it comes up. So if a plant pops up and it's got a broad leaf, we know we only planted 5 of them there at first. So it's very easy to look up what those 5 are. And if it's not one of those, we're going to pull it out. Now, the refinement of that is I actually check out the plant to see if it's a native weed. And then we don't pull it out if it's a native weed. And I would actually take those, whatever needs to get weeded, and I would lay it down on the ground for the crew that came in. And then they knew exactly what to get. And it's tricky, you know, a lot of us don't understand an aster when it's young, and the leaves that you look up for ID of the plant will show a mature plant, but the leaves when it's first sprouting are different. It's very difficult for trained people to know. I'm not a botanist, I'm a landscape architect, right? So I'm half handicapped there. No, I've learned the plants, but I also know how hard it is. So we tried to make the weeding simpler. Now in this project here, it was more important to have a lot of flowering here, something flowering all the time so that anybody looking at this would say, that's beautiful, that's beautiful, that's beautiful. A lot of people look at landscapes, and if it doesn't have flowers, it really doesn't mean much to them. My wife's a social worker, and she's a perfect person to bounce my landscapes off of, to see how a general public will view my design. We'll look out in the backyard and, oh, isn't that a gorgeous tree blooming right there? And it's blooming white. And she wouldn't have noticed. So a lot of the public don't actually even notice white flowers. They just drive right by it. You know, you might notice in the early spring if it's a Bradford pear and it's the only thing blooming around. So color is very important in a garden. And what's the whole purpose of doing it? It's for stormwater quality and for public support. Because if this looked ugly, then all the neighbors would say, just mow it down, we like the lawn better. So this is about a year later as it grew in. So we do have some grasses where the water is coming in. But other than that, it's perennials and low shrubs. And then in the center of it's large shrubs. So a classic trees, large shrubs, perennials blended in with the low shrubs. A real classic landscape architecture approach to planting design, having low in the front, a little taller in the back.
Are there native weeds in that picture as well?
There are no native weeds in that picture.
Don't you know which weeds are good for leaves and which are...
It's interesting.
Even native weeds could take them.
Yeah, I don't mind native weeds generally. An interesting thing about this is it's all blended. So even if a native weed comes in, it's okay in this system. So it's interesting. You walk by here, and if a little something came up here or there, there's even a few non-native weeds in there, and they're not wrecking the system. So because it's all blended, it's natural, it's really working out. So it all depends what time of season you're there. And this was yesterday. You know, I like to be honest. That's the acid test. What does it look like in the winter? And I'm happy with it. Now, it looks a lot like the meadow design, but a lot of it's because there are perennial twigs still up, and then there are regular twigs of shrubs. So that I think was successful. It's got structure in the winter. It's not dead. And I walked around, and there's even habitat in there. So that's,
Complained about no color in that at the winter time, because you had some of those red things that you had fell out.
yeah, there are some in the middle right now.
What is that called then?
Red twig dogwood, yeah. So there are some in there. So as you get closer, I failed in my photography, and yesterday I didn't get
Now that
them.
you mention it,
Yeah, you have to get closer to see it. Yeah, they're hidden in there. So it looks like almost a meadow look, but it's mostly shrubs. So I call that one woody. Planting structure, the real general rule of thumb, if you're going with this method, try to get the structure to be about 40 to 60% shrubs, trees. And almost think of it artistically. 1/3, 2/3. Classic painting, 2/3 of landscape, 1/3 of sky. And if you cut it off right in half, then it looks weird. Well, out in the landscape, it's the same thing. So I'm getting artistic here, which is a little weird for a rain garden, but you can approach a rain garden very artistically, where you can think of, okay, what's the majority of it? Shrubs. And then we'll accent it with perennials and grasses. And that's what this rain garden is. So just for the fun of it, I wanted to just show the sequence of bloom. Very, very, we took a special care on this one to have a lot of blooming. So early spring, I'll just flip through these. Middle of the summer, a little bit later in the summer, fall, late, fall, and then winter. So that rain garden has the evergreen inkberry and the red twig dogwood. So just as an example of other rain gardens that use a fairly similar approach, this is at Clem-Macron Park. Did it with the Garrett Hill Coalition. They chose the plants. They did a nice job. There's a blend of perennials. You can see some sweet bay magnolia in here, and then there's shrubs in the back. So there's a sweet bay magnolia. And this is from Viridian Landscape Studio. I'm sure they paid a lot for this photograph. This is typically what you show your clients when you're getting work. You don't show them the winter shots. So that's where we're at here, and it's just beautiful. But it is a rain garden. But if you look at it a little more closely, trees, 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 and grasses and perennials. And then I was just Googling, winter rain garden, and I saw that. I was like, that's a nice look. It's got small trees, evergreen shrubs. These are probably some warm season grasses, maybe perennials. So I emailed Allison Gillespie, can I use your photo in a slideshow?
The snow makes it easy to see the distinction.
Yeah. This is just beautiful. So the reason I care about how they look is because sometimes you get people saying they don't want rain gardens. So for instance, I feel bad that I have to point out some projects that aren't so good. But this was done over in Camden and got a lot of community support. There are a couple of things here. The water's down here. And the water flows away from the rain garden. So there's no water going to the rain garden, and it's all perennials. And I mentioned about all perennial rain gardens. In the winter, they don't look so great. And that's what it looked like yesterday. The only thing living is 2 switchgrass plants. And let's see if I can get that to work. And there's another one nearby. And there are some nice ones in Camden. Everywhere has nice ones, so it's not that they're not doing nice ones in Camden, it's just some of them aren't working. And so then I started a project at Reverend Evers Park in Camden, did an ecological management plan for them. And I'm talking to the community leaders. And I wanted to manage stormwater and clean it. And it's like, how do we do this? And study how the water flows all over. It's like it'd be perfect opportunities in the park to take water off of the streets, get it into rain gardens, because they've got the combined sewer. And it's exactly, if you can get water off the street, then it doesn't go in the combined sewer, then it doesn't blend with sewage during overflows and go out. So it's just a beautiful way to impact the area ecologically. And not only that, they get flooding in the streets. And when it floods in the streets, it's often sewage. So it'd be really nice to be able to do some rain gardens, but that's what we got. We don't like rain gardens. Why? Have you seen the one over in Parkside? I said, yeah, I just saw that. I said, I couldn't believe it. Yeah. And talking more to them. Okay, so how about, well, maybe we'll do vegetated swales. I think they said okay because they didn't know what I was talking about exactly right away. But they did say we want colorful plants all year. And there was a conversation that one of the ladies had with another person who was somewhat related to some of the Camden rain gardens, and said, you say, well, we use those plants because habitat. You know, that's why, you know, it may look dead in the winter, but, you know, these are all native plants and it's all habitat. That's what I get. Yeah. Those are quotes. We don't like habitats. So, you know, and you sort of got to understand people who are fighting poverty. Animals aren't good. They get in your house. The turkeys out in the park, they don't know if they're good. The deer, no. The possums, you know. It's a struggle. And so frankly, when you're trying to work on high ownership value in your neighborhood, habitat really doesn't come to the top of the list. So we had to find a meeting ground, and I had to just tell them, I'm going to make your park and your vegetated swale that we agreed on beautiful. Because I knew that over at Audubon Park, we had a similar issue. It had to be beautiful. So then I'm like, oh, what did I just promise? I promised beauty at this. Because we all know native landscapes turn brown in the winter. So it's always difficult. So this is where we decided to put in the vegetated swale. We got NIFWIF funding, different funding. And this is the sketch that Melissa Boffa, she's a landscape architect, and she volunteered this sketch. And the first one she sent me, I was like, oh, you gotta dumb down the colors. I'll never do that. That's just too beautiful, and we'll just disappoint them. So we dumbed down the colors a little bit, but she's doing it for free, so there's only so much I could do. So then there's this of course everyone looks at this, yes, I want that. But then if you put it in and it's brown half the year, the community is going to say, oh, it does not match what you gave me. You sold me wrong. So that was tough. Well, we had a bunch of different events, worked with New Jersey Tree Foundation, American Water. So we've been working out there. Last group we just had out a couple weeks ago doing some woodland restoration. So that's what it was like when we put it in. And I was like, whew, it's got color. The leaves didn't fall off yet. I was like so happy. So these are the dogwoods, those red twig dogwoods, and also some winterberry holly. And made sure to have some evergreen in there. The inkberry is like one of our few evergreens, shrubs. And a lady went by. We had a nice group here, and it was the funniest thing. This lady walked by, and it was like she was up on stage. Thanks for making my hood look good. And she said it about 10 times. It's like, thank you. I was like, whew, okay, we're doing good. And then these girls came by at the end of one event, and their parents, and the little boy there. And her parents were like, don't touch the shovels. And I'm like, no, you can have fun. So they're having a lot of fun with the shovel. And then I'm sort of explaining to the parents, this is so that, and I'm giving the parents almost a wink, this is so that you can help protect our area, our plants over there. And one of the little girls says, yeah, if I see anybody messing with those, I'm gonna beat them up. And I'm like, oh no, don't beat them up. So that was great. And so that's what it looks like. We were trying to get a red native plum, sorry, a red native crab. It's called the cherry, sorry about that. It's called the Canada red cherry. It's a little bit like this. We couldn't get it, but we got the a non-native plum. I know it's not an invasive, but the rest of the plants are all natives. And so the community was happy with the color. Now for the honest shot, that was from just about a week ago. So that's what it looks like in the winter. It was just barely planted. All of this, we're using a red switchgrass too, because we want color. So we got a Shenandoah or switchgrass, so a lot of the leaves will be red when it grows up. So this is, there's a yellow twig dogwood, red twig. So there will be some nice winter interest. You know, it's not bad. Whenever you judge a planting when it's first put in, it's a little rough. This will look a lot even nicer, I think, next winter. So there's the red twig and yellow twig. And, you know, they're cultivars and slightly native, which I think is okay. Because you have to push a little bit when you go for beauty. You might have to get a native that's not from our exact area. Maybe it's a little bit down south and you can say it's for global warming, so I'm putting in a southern magnolia. I'm good with that. Evergreen, you know, they're going to be really happy up here over the years. And so we got community buy-in to do a stormwater bump out because we did a good job in the park. So in general, riparian and floodplain species are often ideal. General species are good. Grasses, they're warm season grasses sprout when it's warm. So then you get a nice head of seed later in the fall, and they hang out in the winter. It's okay to put in some cool season grasses too, especially in a meadow. You need both. It's always important to have flowers and do a sequence of bloom. And so just to wrap up, as I was thinking about it, basically giving you two methods to do a good rain garden. One is the savanna, and the other is woody. Avoid the all perennials, and make sure there's four-season interest. And that's so that I don't hear again that we don't want rain gardens and we don't like rain gardens. Thank you.
Speak a bit more about maybe going into the technical soil aspects or any layer cuts.
Yeah. Go into that. There's many approaches out there to soils. So the one that has been used traditionally in the area for the last, say, 5-10 years is to dig out all the soil and put it in a rain garden soil mix. And it just inherently, many of us can figure out that that's just not a great way to go sustainably, because you're digging out 2 feet, shipping in something from somewhere. And so it's always better to work with your existing soils. Now, I understand some areas have almost no infiltration. You've got to do an infiltration test. Dig down to the depth of where the bottom of the rain garden will be, with the bottom of the rain garden soils, and see if there's any infiltration. Infiltration, even ½ inch per hour is reasonable. Inch an hour is reasonable. Below that, it gets more difficult, and I know some instances you have to dig out the soil and put it in a rain garden. But some people would argue, maybe that's not the right place for a rain garden. Maybe that's not the right thing to do. We have to rip out all the soil that's already there, just put in new soil. Let's see.
So, I have about 10 more slides to answer your question.
Oh, we have a plan?
What time is it? 10 after. How long do we have? Okay, I'll go for this. So investigate what's underneath there in soils, do a test pit.
About 6 feet, just to see what all the soils are like. And then these are just the different things that engineers such as Melior Design would check on. So that's the test pit, and there's different levels. This is to see what's going on underneath, and to see if there's any modeling and any high groundwater table occasionally. And then this level here, they used for the infiltration testing. That's the modeling that you might see if there's temporary inundation. And then soil testing, it's important to do, because you want to reuse the soils, I did. We saved $40,000 on the project by not doing it right there. So we tested the soils and we got the sand silt clay. We didn't get the sand particle sizes. Next time we'll do that. I'm learning more about how important that is. But I live in this general area, so I knew generally what the soils were like. What was fascinating was we found out that we had clay underneath one part of the rain garden and we had sand under the other. So it was very interesting, yeah. Big difference in rates, and it changed our design. So do a particle size analysis. That's the most important thing on the soil test, because that's what affects what you would add to the soil. These are slightly old prices, but Penn State, it's not that expensive to get the testing done. In Rutgers, yeah.
Is that particle size, is that another test that you need to ask for?
Yes, yes. Yeah, so most people are used to NPK, and then you can add organic matter. And that was about $9. And then the particle size analysis provides sand silt clay. It was about $20. So that's like the most important thing, and it's the most overlooked thing. And that means that you can test the soil as you have. I not only test the topsoil, I test the subsoil too, because if it's going to be blended in a soil mix, then you need to know what's there. So you do the infiltration toward the bottom. There's different types of infiltration testing. One's a percolation test, and there's plenty of online information of how to do that. This is a double ring infiltrometer, which is a more technical test, and it's what Pennsylvania requires. Now, if it's a retrofit project, you don't have to meet all the requirements, but if it's a project that has to meet runoff requirements for development, then it has to be done using one of these or similar devices, and you have to follow rigorous protocols. So there it is. Basically, you fill out the outer area with water, and you measure how much it sinks down in the middle. So the water's sinking down in the middle, and you measure the drop in there. And how it works, it soaks the ground on the outside, so you're actually measuring how much water is getting down right through the middle. The percolation testing, there's a couple of different methods. This one's Philadelphia Water Department one. And let's see. Oh yeah, dig a hole. New Jersey doesn't say to put a can in, but Philadelphia Water Department suggests put it in can in. And you measure the rate down. So you set a nail and measure the rate. So that's a quick way. Those are online. Now you get different results. And I'm just going to talk about this. Let me just skim this for a second. In Philadelphia, for the method with a can, if you get about 1 inch per hour, it's okay for a home rain garden. And that translates to about a 1/2 inch per hour actual infiltration rate. So if you did a double ring infiltrometer and got about a 1/2 inch rate. If you did the can method, that's about a 1 inch rate, just because it's different technically. And New Jersey says 1.5 inch per hour is their minimum. Well, that's because they're not using the can, so the water is getting out the sides and out the bottom. So it's confusing. But this, I figured out how to correlate the different methods.
Is it because the soil was so different between the two?
No, they just used a different method to explain to the public. Yeah. Okay. Oh yeah, the Pennsylvania system is very technical, where you have to get it right down with a double infiltrometer. Let the engineers do it. It's a real pain to stand there all day long and measure a 1/4 inch of water dropping. So bioretention soil. I like blending my own on site. Hopefully you could have a loam or sandy loam. Maybe have to blend in some sand, buy sand and blend it in. That's like probably the best way to do it. Maybe just compost. Maybe it's a reasonable soil and all you have to do is bring a little compost into it. Now the existing soil, if you're down at 5 to 10% clay, then you can use it. That's why that sand silt clay is really important. pH 5.5 to 6.5 is good. Can add 20 to 30% composted organic matter by volume. So this is I was just Googling about reusing existing soils. I came up with Kevin Herbert blog. You can look his up. He came to the same conclusion I did, which is digging everything out is just a big waste of money, and maybe just find another location. For the soil itself, so loam or sandy loam, that's in this area, but we really don't want it as sandy as that. We'd like to be in the 40 to 70% range. And I don't know about you, but these charts drive me nuts. And I can't read them, so it took me a long time. But anyway, you come down here, silt, and so you follow that down. Sand, follow that up. Clay that way. So, and I was at a presentation, they said, you know, this sandy loam is the weirdest thing because it's just the leftover space between the other categories that they really cared about. So we don't want any really sandy loam that's too sandy, so it's best to have the sand in the 40 to 70% range. And you guys can dig into this online later. And coarse sand is best if you're actually doing a soil mix. You have to order sand, so you order coarse sand. So this is one of those instances of having horrible under drainage, no infiltration. So this was a soil mix that was brought in. You can just buy it. And so this would be an example of a soil you could bring in 50 to 60% sand, 20 or 30% topsoil if it has low clay content, and leaf compost. There's many different formulas out there. All right. Here's another formula for soil mix, and you can look these up online. 15% by volume, double shredded hardwood mulch, sharp sand, that's the concrete sand, and some topsoil. And then of course I wouldn't do peat moss. So these are my comments on that. Use a local source, composted wood chips instead of necessarily shredded hardwood bulk, concrete sand, and avoid the peat moss because that's generally coming from bogs up in Canada and just shipped in. So try to find a good local source of compost that's fairly weed-free. How much time do I have? I'm sorry, you're over there.
That's okay,
Yeah.
yeah, about 6 or 7 minutes.
Oh, thanks. All right. I guess I can move on to another question.
How do you size the regular?
That was such a softball, I'll just hit it. All right. basically, Michelle answered that 2 days ago at a seminar. This way, the drainage area, square feet times 1 inch deep is what you need in the rain garden. That's just a basic rule of thumb. So in other words, that's going to make a volume. And then in the rain garden, you got a volume of water. But in your soils that are pre-porous, you're going to get about 1/3 volume in there, maybe 1/4 volume. So you can actually count a little bit of the volume in the soil. So the water would go into the soil and it's counted as volume. It's a little more technical here, but it's on rainscaping.org. You could look there. And let's see what's next. That's it.
Can you speak to the maintenance of the rain garden? I mean, are these volunteer groups from that can
Yeah.
feed them
Yep.
to food and all that?
Yeah, I'm so used to having no maintenance that I've adjusted designing to be no maintenance or bad maintenance. Now, then there's a whole huge movement which is bringing good maintenance to the rain garden. So now the world's shifting and we're starting to get training programs. Camden's got one, Philadelphia has it, and there's feedback loops from that maintenance to the design. But I've seen such bad mowing and such neglect of them that I tried to get to a design that is very, very low maintenance. So I'm a little bit of an outlier because many people are putting in the rain gardens and saying we need high maintenance on them, which is true. But I'd rather design so it doesn't need much maintenance. For instance, the Van Sciver School rain garden, the mowing guy was getting in, going down the slopes, cutting off the littler shrubs. So we came back with about $3,000, $5,000 worth of plants and put them on the edge. And so just mower, it's like the Geico ad. Mower guys do what they do. They mow, and they're going to mow down your rain garden. You got to help keep them out. So for the Van Sciver School rain garden, that's a meadow. Many people wouldn't know if a grass came in, whether it was a native or non-native. Will it affect the function of the rain garden? No. So that's why I thought that would be a perfect system. They told me they didn't have any maintenance. And we sold them, this is less maintenance than your lawn. And they had people in the school who loved working outside, but they had their garden already. They had very dedicated people at the school doing outside volunteering with the students. But she let me know, look, I can't help you, and I'm retiring in 2 years. So yeah, I knew this had to be really a no maintenance landscape. The one at Peters Creek, it looks natural. Fortunately, it's a woodland edge behind it with a creek behind it, so it blends in. But really, it's doing something that works where you're at. Thank you.